All right. I'm excited for another episode of Israel Unfiltered. I got with me Michael Dickson, the Executive Director of StandWithUs Israel. Um, Michael, I don't know, do you need or does Stand With Us need an introduction? Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what exactly do with Stand With Us and what Stand With Us is? Let's jump right into this.
I'm happy to. Thanks for having me, first of all. It's great to be with you. So, Stand With Us is an international education organization educating about Israel, fighting anti Semitism, and supporting Israel around the world. That's what we do. We do it in many different ways, from middle school to high school to the college campus, to adult and community efforts and campaigns. Very active on social media, with a pro bono legal network supporting people facing down anti-Semitic campaigns and BDS action, and empowering people around the world, including here in Israel, which is where I am, to stand up and be counted, make their voice heard, help support the effort to push back against anti-Semitic attacks and anti-Semitic defamation, and also to get the truth out there when it comes to Israel, to provide an accurate perception of what Israel really is. That's what we do at Stand With Us.
Would you say you're succeeding in your mission?
Yeah, I would say we're succeeding. Look, I've been doing this for 17 years almost, and I get to see some of the very worst, the worst anti-Semitic attacks and boycott efforts. And at the same time, I get to see the incredible amount of people that join us and support us, and the difference that we make on an individual level, both anecdotally from things that I hear, plus the huge numbers and effect that we have in terms of bringing people closer to Israel. So yes, I think we're doing great around the world, and increasingly we are global. We're operating in the UK, in Brazil, in Australia, in South Africa, in Holland, obviously all across the United States and Canada. And we're going to be doing more, and we're going to be growing more as time goes on this year.
Awesome. Great. So what's the difference between, let's say, you said you're executive director of Stand With Us Israel. What are the responsibilities of, let's say, Stand With Us Israel as opposed to Stand With Us America or Holland or the UK, et cetera? Given that this is the Jewish state and the majority of Jews are here, do the responsibilities of yours differ than if you were to have the same title for a different nation?
So that's a really interesting question. Look, Stand With Us was formed in 2001. It was in the bad days of the Second Intifada, when buses and cafes and public places were blowing up. And the picture that was being portrayed on the news was very different to the reality of what was happening on the ground here in Israel. And shortly after a horrific murder of two boys in a cave in Tekoa, Yoel Israel and Kobe Mandel, the founders of Stand With Us, the would-be founders of Stand With Us, got together in a living room in Los Angeles to get people together from all across the Jewish community to say, what is going on here? Here, two boys have been murdered, and they're being reported in the Los Angeles Times almost as if they were responsible for their own deaths because they were quote unquote settlers. And so from that meeting, the answers that they got about what we're doing to actively put a correct analysis of what's going on the ground were not good. And so they decided to do something themselves. And that's how Stand With Us was formed, by a group of people from all across the political spectrum, from across the Jewish community, who wanted to do something. And that's something they did. Now, almost 2 years on, has become a global movement with really many hundreds of thousands of people involved. The nature of my job is different because, given the kind of organization that we are, because Israel is subject to a different level of criticism. It is put under the spotlight, under the microscope. Every action we do is given a spin, and there is an active defamation campaign against our country. Now, there isn't an active defamation campaign in the same way against many, and probably the majority of other countries around the world. So that's why our job has particular significance, and why what we do is probably different than a Stand With Us, should it need to exist in another country on behalf of a different country, unlike it does for Israel.
Got it. Fascinating. Very interesting. So, I mean, it started, you mentioned that like this came about, was it because of the way the LA Times covered their murder? Is that correct?
That's correct. Right. Yeah. And that was, if you remember, that was
I mean,
broadly
yeah,
represented
every murder of a Jew goes the same way when
yeah,
it comes to the
until
liberal
today.
press, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, so that was 22 years ago. Things have gotten extremely worse, in my opinion, when it comes to the media. At least that's the American media that I read. I see it in social media. If it's so evident, in fact, why do the lies, anti-Semitic lies, continue? And even bigger question: why do people still believe what they read from the LA Times or New York Times, et cetera, Washington Post?
Well, I think what's changed in those years is that social media didn't exist when we were in our infancy. And we were early adopters, and we tried to be creative adopters of that social media in the years since. And, to your question in general, we're talking about anti-Israel sentiment, but you're right to label it anti-Semitism because that's basically what it is. We never dispute, obviously, that anyone can criticize Israel. If you want criticism of Israel, go to Israel, get in a cab, start talking to the driver, you'll get criticism of Israel. We're talking about something very different. And so all the things that we see are basically new spins on a very ancient disease, and that disease is anti-Semitism. Why do people believe it? For the same reasons they always did. People like to scapegoat, people are jealous, people are racist. And so we feel the brunt of that, both as individual Jews living in the diaspora and as the Jewish state attempting to live within the family of nations.
Do you think this is just like fun for a minute? Do you think trying to live amongst the family of nations could potentially be a bigger problem? And I'll ask you because I know you guys work a lot with policy and things, and I've wondered, like, should we also step out of the UN as an example? One reason it's such a shit show. Do you think our active wanting to be included is almost like counterproductive? You know what I mean? In a sense, like, is that possible that hey, maybe we're just going to do our own thing and screw you guys and we'll figure it out, and then maybe they'll just stop being as obsessed? What are your thoughts on that? And do you have any experience with that?
Yeah, I mean, look, Shimon Peres, who was at some point in his career was all about the new Middle East and us being accepted in this region, let alone the world, was also a person that at one point said, shmum, we don't need, being the Hebrew for the United Nations, we don't need that UN. We carry on regardless. I think we need to understand that Israel always needs to be in charge of its own destiny. Israel needs to be in charge, obviously, of its own security. And we march forward and do what's best for our country. But at the same time, we can build efforts and build bridges. And the truth is that I don't feel like we should write everyone off. I get why that would be an instinct of many people, seeing the kind of virulent and horrific anti-Semitism that we see, seeing that, for instance, Israel outstretching its hand to South Africa to help in so many different ways, particularly with their water crisis, and then South Africa basically slapping Israel around the face and saying, we're going to downgrade your embassy. Those kind of efforts, when they get rebuffed, I get how people feel like we should disconnect. But the truth is that whilst we should never reward anyone or even try to acquiesce or appease anyone who is pushing back against us like that, there are many bridges to be built. And there are many people that want to be allies with us and friends. And there's much that Israel has and can do for the world. And there are people that are willing to accept that. And I think that, obviously we've been called the nation that dwells alone. But at the same time, we do have many allies and many supporters. And one of our missions at Stand With Us is to try and grow that sphere of influence, bring people on board who are the ones that say, the anti-Semites don't represent me. I want to build bridges with Israel and the Jewish people. And we do have many friends.
Got it. So, but do you think kind of trying not just to get a little more specific on my question, just kind of want to get your opinion since you're far more involved in this. I'm not saying withdraw business. I'm not saying withdraw humanitarian aid. I'm not saying, if you can go to Turkey and send people to help out to the earthquakes, if you can go to South America and help them with water, despite all that, right? I don't mean from the private sector, from humanitarian, but do we ever want, I feel like we let people kick us around. I'll give an example. not just the UN. I was like, I think, I have no proof, right? No one has evidence. I have an intuition. If we left the UN, there'd be less anti-Semitism at the UN. That's my opinion. We have no way to prove that because there's no historical context for it. However, like I was saying, let's just say like Ukraine as an example, they're asking us for weapons and they're voting with Russia and Iran as they're murdering them against Israel. And then I wonder, like, how about we just, after we already committed to helping them with Iron Dome to protect their civilians against the Russian invasion of bombing civilians, shouldn't like Israel, pardon the pun, take a stand and say, you know what, until you vote with us or not with Russia and Iran, I know most recently they abstained, then we can talk about being friends. But I'm sick of giving, you trying to pressure us, ask us, give us a hard time, and then you were literally voting with Russia and Iran and China, your foes that are actively trying to kill you and me, against us. You know what I mean? And then we go and we vote, with Ukraine against Russia, China, and we should. I'm just saying that's the moral thing to do. I'm not saying we shouldn't. But do you think there should have been a stronger reaction, given that they keep comparing themselves, Putin to Nazi, which I don't like that comparison, as evil as Putin is, and things of the sort? I mean, should the Jewish nation be pushing back, at least in rhetoric, or at least in the UN, or saying we're going to discontinue helping with the Iron Dome and other things and until you align with us and not Russia and Iran?
Yeah, so I don't think that the Iron Dome actually is useful when it comes to Russian weaponry, but certainly Israel has offered to support the Ukraine in many different ways. Look, as an organization, we're an educational nonprofit, and we differ therefore with other political nonprofits, and so we don't actually put forward policy for what Israel should or should not be doing. And that goes across the board with all different issues. What we do want to do, however, is educate people about those policies and what is happening on the ground so that they reach a conclusion that's based on facts. And that's really where we're at, bringing facts to people, bringing understanding to people, particularly in a situation where there are such gaps of information and there is such active misinformation, that we feel that what we do is so necessary on the educational sphere.
Got it. Okay. In other words, you're not the right person to ask.
You need to speak to the ambassadors of the UN.
Right. No, I was just wondering, because I know that you have a lot of experience kind of in this thing, dealing with policies in other countries. So I was wondering maybe if you had an insight or an opinion that might expand or challenge the way I think. And our viewers, I was hoping maybe if you would be able to do that, but you're not. Okay. So let's move to where you're definitely strong, right? It's Stand With Us is awesome is when it comes to social media, right? How much do you think social media plays a part when it comes to, anti-Semitism, anti-Israel? One, how much does it play? And do people listen? Because can you actually, I don't think you can change minds of anti-Semites. Tell me if you disagree, with any kind of content, right? If someone's hell-bent on being a bigot, they're hell-bent on being a bigot. They're definitely not going to listen to someone that let's say they want to destroy. But most of, let's say, I don't know, the majority, the indifferent majority, do they actually care about this stuff, or are we better off more people being indifferent? I'm just trying to get a feeling here, as someone who went to a college campus in the United States, and seeing the extreme amount of anti-Semitism on campus, and then learning most people don't give a shit. They just wanted to drink and party, and they came to our pie house and partied, and that was it. And so I was just wondering what you thought. I was wondering what you think of how you tackle those that are, so there's three segments of people that I guess you would want to target. One is those that are already, let's say, Israel advocates and Zionists and just support the Jewish cause, such as me that you're speaking to. There are those that hate us, right? And then there are those that are, let's say, indifferent. Is your messaging and targeting different to the three of them, or is it kind of the same messaging? I'm just wondering how you go about that from social media, a marketing strategy, and et cetera, as an organization.
So there's a lot to unpick there. Look,
Sorry.
In terms of it
was like a 90-second question.
It's all good stuff. Let's dig into it. I mentioned we were early adopters of social media. We have a weekly peak reach on social media of over 105 million people. We're active on all major platforms. We are active in multiple languages. Our most viewed language after English is actually Arabic, which is really super interesting to me. When I was speaking to the person who runs our Arabic social media, I said to him, are they just coming to fight with us? Like, is that what the engagement is coming from? And he said, sure, that's the case for some on the front end, but you should see the back end. And he showed me the direct messages, and the amount of outpouring of support and interest and curiosity from the Arab world is really super interesting. So social media allows us to level the playing field. I agree with that, the way you split up kind of the population, right, of the amount of people who support us, who are ardent Zionists, the people who hate us, and the people who are in the middle. I'm never trying to convince the people who hate us. That's not what we're doing.
Russell Robinson, when I interviewed him, in full disclosure, the CEO of JNF, he's a client, full disclosure, but he says engaging with the haters just gives them more eyeballs and views and more things. That's not worth your effort, but it could actually be counterproductive. We use such a positive story.
I
what are your thoughts on that?
There have been some cases whereby haters have reformed. There was a guy by the name of Adam Elayan who was at Tufts University, member of Students for Justice in Palestine, fiercely anti-Semitic, huge record of anti-Semitic, social media activity. He reached out to us, and when we were finally sure that he was, coming with the right attitude, we hooked him up.
Reached out with what? I'm sorry. What did he say? Do you
he wanted to make good on the kind of anti-Semitic tweets he'd put out as a teenager once he'd grown up a bit. And he wanted to publicly apologize. And so we needed to check that he was, for real. And so we then hooked him up with one of our Arab educators by the name of Hussein Abu Bakr. Hussein is an Egyptian dissident who was jailed in Egypt for trying to learn Hebrew and found amnesty in the United States. He works with us as an educator, and he met with Adam, as did some people from our legal division, and we were able to create a platform for him to basically say sorry and set the record straight. Now, that rarely happens, but when it does happen, it's excellent. That's not the bulk of our focus. And by the way,
what's the ripple effect? Sorry, before you change topics, what's the ripple effect on that?
I think we don't know. I think that
is that right? I'm curious, like how many of their followers, maybe question, I don't expect them to turn over, but at least kind of maybe distance themselves. Maybe there's more here than I don't know. Or I always wonder how much of a difference that makes, you hear when leaders turn or an evangelical decides they don't believe in Jesus anymore. So I was wondering, how much of effect does that make when the anti-Semitism is a religion of hatred? Do you turn people? They just go, you know what I mean? Or do they write them off? Someone is Islam, killed this person, or I'm just curious.
Yeah,
you have no cues or anything.
I think it's when people say, how successful are you? Well, up to a degree. If you're doing evaluations and you're looking at analytics and you're understanding who's coming and returning to your programs, et cetera, et cetera. At the same time, you also know by someone you'll meet 10 years after you had an interaction with them, and they'll tell you that actually that interaction changed their perspective and maybe even changed their life.
Isn't that amazing, by the way?
Yeah, amazing.
In my personal life, I just mean business stuff, oh, you said something that was really wise, or a former employee or a former client at sales call, been hey, you mentioned this one tip, and I implemented it at my new company 3 years later, and it was amazing. We built this market strategy. And I was really? It was I said that? Oh, I'm sure I did. Sounds like something I would say. I don't remember. I don't know. Sometimes I don't remember the conversation that speaks to so many people. So I find it fascinating. Did you? What was the name of this person that, let's say, that came from? Say it again. Adam Elayan.
Yeah.
Would you ask him? Would you feel comfortable asking him? How do you feel those that you led and that followed you? Do you think any of them have changed their opinions based on you being able to come clean and repenting for your anti-Semitism?
Sure, I myself would be interested to know. But like I say, he's the exception rather than the rule. We generally are trying to speak to one, the people who are committed Zionists, because you want to empower your base and energy, because you want them reach out to that great big 90+% in the middle who either don't know anything about Israel or don't care about Israel. By the way, them not caring about Israel is okay. We don't care about every single issue that's in the world. But what we do want to make sure is that they're inoculated against lies that they may see or the misrepresentation
Right.
that they may see either on social media or in the media in general. So that's what we're trying to do. We're building a movement by building an army of educators who will then educate others. And that's how it grows. And that's how we've been successful over 2 decades.
So I'm going to pick apart almost everything you say because it's very fascinating to me. Okay. Changing minds is something fascinating to me. How do you inoculate someone if don't care, they're totally indifferent for Israel? I mean, to their credit, because it's not like living a healthy life. It's nothing to do with them. They live far away. Not caring is probably a healthy lifestyle. But how does one how do you inoculate someone? Ignorance is bliss, right? How do you inoculate someone that doesn't give a shit to begin with? And have no way to target them because they've let's say from an advertising perspective, or they're not engaging with anyone's. I'm just curious, how's that go about? How do you inoculate someone that doesn't, that's indifferent, that's hesitant?
You do it by finding connection points between them and Israel on their interests. And so we have over the years brought influencers, now they're called influencers. They used to be called vloggers and bloggers and who knows what else. But by finding connection points between people and Israel and showing them what they enjoy and like and respect and how that exists within Israel. And so and that may be something related to current affairs, okay, and freedom and democracy and all these things that we often talk about, but it may also be to do with sports or surfing or ecology, many different issues that we can create connection points with people and show them that Israel is something positive in their life. You may know nothing about Australia, but you probably have a positive view of the country. Because everyone likes Australians, right? They're laid back, there's beach, there's surf, what's not to like, right? And that may be true with many other countries as well. So why shouldn't it be true with Israel? Why shouldn't Israel? And then if Israelis are accepted, why shouldn't they go the next level and be respected? And then we can talk about kind of deeper issues. So there are different levels of engagement for different peoples, and we're trying to create those points of connection.
Got it. All right. By the way, it's very smart. I mean, in business too, if you can find a common denominator not related to business, you're more likely to be able to have a positive conversation in business if you were to pursue that. From my experience, when it comes to networking, very fascinating. So, okay, so you can't find the indifferent people. You find a common denominator that's not directly Israel related, tie it in, and ideally those people that are interested in that interest, whatever it is, travel blogs, food, I don't know, anything there, and then you'll be able to tie them in that way. Fascinating.
Yeah, and we're doing 2 things at once. We're being proactive, and we're being responsive. When lies are being told about Israel, when there's a war, when there's a BDS campaign telling you, you should take Israel out of Airbnb, or those sort of things are happening, you need to be responsive in the moment, and then you're reaching out to your broad public to try and tell them what they're being told is a lie and it's wrong. At the same time, you want to be strategic, play the long game, and reach out to people, like we said, meeting them where their interests lie. And also empowering people through programs, and that's what we do. We have leadership programs to then take the message on themselves and take the next step themselves. And that's why one of the things we're doing is empowering campus leaders in the United States and indeed all around the world, and also here in Israel, trying to identify the next generation of Israel's leaders and ambassadors with a small a, and teaching them how the world views Israel so that they can then tell their own story, not a government's view or any political view, their own story through their own eyes. And that people can understand and appreciate and know and hopefully love the Israeli people themselves.
Do you do any connections when it comes to particularly like entrepreneurs that might be indifferent? And because obviously I see a lot of potential there, and that's kind of in the space that I play.
Yeah.
I was wondering, what does that look like? I'm just curious to hear.
Most people are thrilled to come to Israel. And one of the things we've done through our Israeli fellowship program is, we run this program on a series of campuses all across the country. And whether it's Hebrew University or Tel Aviv or Beersheba, towards the end of their year of our program, they then have to take on a project that elevates Israel on the global stage. And one of the things they often do is host groups here in Israel. And I have never seen a group that isn't excited to come, and they may be food bloggers, and they may be sports reporters, or they may be business people or social entrepreneurs. Sometimes they think it might be dangerous, and sometimes they may have been warned off, and sometimes they may be skeptical, but they unanimously leave with a positive experience of what Israel is. And sometimes, by the way, we get caught up in the whole conflict of things, and sometimes they really could care less. They want to experience the country for what it is and what it represents, or they want to do business, right? Let's talk about the Abraham Accords, for instance. A lot of these links are being forged because of business links, and because they want to do business with us, because we're a powerhouse in many different ways, and because of the creativity and the dynamism that is here. And so for me, that's been amazing to see. And often these people carry a significant audience with them, of people who are similar.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Do you reach out to entrepreneurs and do you want to do a tech tour, or how does that? I'm very curious here. So
yeah, so
they reach out, and vice versa. Do they reach out and they're like, hey, we know Israel's got a great tech scene. I'm looking to invest. I'm looking for business. Do they reach out to you, or I guess how do those? What are those channels? Not just within Stand With Us, maybe it's within the government, or what? What does that look like? When one reaches out one way and the other, what are they looking for? And
we get a lot of approaches. Israeli institutions and businesses get a lot of approaches. And we actually built a visitor center in Jerusalem across the street from the King David Hotel. Very high tech, high spec, really interactive and engaging. And we're hosting groups from all over the world, and not just birthright groups in thousands of participants, but also business people, entrepreneurs, non-Jewish visitors to Israel who want to understand what Israel really is. We do this thing called Israel 101, which basically takes them through the history, geography, diversity, economy, issues of war and peace, to kind of help them understand really where they are when they arrive. And it's very interactive as well. We utilize the technology that we have there. And so people can book to come or just come by and see us. And we're anticipating in this year, we will have 10,000 visitors through our doors. Very dynamic, experienced presenters that are engaging with them. And there's a lot of interest. So these, and the points of connection come to them through social media, through LinkedIn, through Twitter, and all these various things. And directly because they've heard of us now. We're an organization with prominence, but also through networks and connections that we have here in Israel as well. We just did a partner project with our crowd when they had their Global Investor Summit, hosting many of their guests in Jerusalem as well. So lots of connections and things happening, and so much interest when it comes to commerce and business.
Right. Yeah. No, the Our Crowd Summit is like my favorite conference. I love that thing. It's a lot of fun for those that don't know. It's in January, February for a full day. Terrific. Very interesting. Okay, so now let's talk about actually the Israel supporters and Zionists. So I have this weird thing, and I think it's me. I might scroll Twitter, and it's kind of annoyed of seeing the same Zionist stuff. Well, it's kind of annoying in a way, maybe because I know it. You're not teaching me anything new. It's not as entertaining.
We've won you already, y'all.
Right. There you go. Sure. Yes, agreed. I wonder if that's only me. How do you speak to a Zionist audience differently than, let's say, you would to those that are indifferent that you're trying to educate? What does that look like?
Well, one of the things we have to bear in mind is that most of our audience is outside of Israel. So actually what you and me see on the day-to-day is not necessarily what they see, although they follow things very closely. You know how quickly things happen. So what we've done over the years is build up a massive audience. It's kind of like the reverse of what a media company would be. If I were to set up a TV news or information network, I would say, okay, we're going to put out this content, and then we're going to find our audience. We've done the reverse, which is we found our audience fairly early on, and it's growing and growing and growing. And now we have to be there to make sure that we're providing accurate, regular information that we can give them. So some of it is giving them news. On our Instagram stories, we have breaking news. I never thought we'd be like a news network, but it comes with a responsibility as well. We've got to make sure that we are providing accurate and real-time information in sometimes very tense and confusing circumstances. So we're getting all that information, we're disseminating it in a clear way, that also in a way that they can then use and share with others. Then there are issues of controversy. We want to create fact sheets and explainers, memes, infographics. We want to make sure people have the content that they need so they can share it. And obviously each thing we're doing, including video, we have to customize to each different platform, from TikTok to Instagram to Facebook to LinkedIn and so on. So this is a constant ongoing process. And the more Zionist viewers are the ones that are going to share this most prominently.
Right. They're the ones the most likely to share. That's true.
They're going to disseminate it on their networks. And then we look at our statistics and our numbers to understand how we're reaching beyond that audience. And we have a very wide reach. So we have Christian supporters of Israel, Jewish supporters of Israel, people who are supporting Israel from the Arab world, people supporting Israel for many different reasons, huge background of different people, liberals, conservatives. And so we need to find things, talking about those connection points, we need to find content that will appeal to all of them. And so that's what we're doing on an ongoing basis. And the analytics really give us confidence that, we're able to hit the sweet spot for different audiences in different ways.
Terrific. And then if you were to segment, let's say, the Hebrew speaking or the Israeli Zionists versus, wait, do you do any marketing in Hebrew for the Israeli audience?
We do, to an extent. We want to teach Israeli. So we run programs in Israeli schools, we run programs in Israeli universities, we run programs for Israeli business people, because we don't feel that Israelis fully understand how the world views them and how best to articulate their message, even with the best in the world. So we're trying to help Israelis be better conduits of good and accurate and clear information, and teach them how to transmit that message as well.
Okay, terrific. So those are mostly like hands-on, in-person, more workshop kind of things?
Correct.
As opposed to, yes. Fantastic. Yeah, the universities are bad. Also here too. I mean, they're always corrupt. Another time, maybe not. I don't know. Maybe we'll get to it later. And so what about the Anglo community, Olim, such as myself?
Yeah.
Is that the same approach as, let's say, supporters abroad?
Yeah, with the understanding that obviously they experience Israel in a different way. Anglos here are sending their kids to the army. Anglos here are participating in Israeli society and in different way. Even we sometimes forget that, the way that the intensity and the breadth of the way that we see things here in Israel is not the same as our counterparts in the diaspora. We get it more, we feel it more in our skin. And so we have to understand that when we're articulating it out. We need to give context to things, explain terms, and that people are going to feel it in a different way. And so I guess the same thing that we tell Israelis, which is that the conversation you're having around your Friday night table is not the same one as if you flew to New York and got into a cab and started speaking to the driver there, is the same for Anglos as well. We know it when we host friends from around the world. They just see things in a different way, and that's, understandable, but it means that we have to give context to things in a different way as well.
Right. With the college students, might like trigger warnings and kitty gloves. So yesterday,
in Israel, by the way, we definitely do. They speak language. They speak it better than Israelis. They don't say and so they're the ones that can actually be super helpful in reaching out to people in the countries that they came from.
Very cool. Awesome. So yesterday, as you probably know, I know people are watching this, there were German tourists that came to Israel. They rented a car in Tel Aviv, and then they drove into, was it Shechem?
Yeah, I believe so.
Shechem. In English, it's called Nablus.
Nablus.
With this Israeli rent a car, thinking, what's the big deal? I'll go visit this Palestinian town. What's the difference, right? No, these aren't, I don't know if you want to call them anti-Semites or not, and I'll explain why in a moment. The people that came to Israel as tourists, see Tel Aviv, they probably did Jerusalem, Mitzad, I have no idea. And then, they rent a car and then they go, I'll go look at the Palestinian territories and we'll drive in. They get attacked, mobbed, almost murdered, literally a lynching on the streets, just like anyone would. And afterwards, they were saved. And then after they were interviewed, and they said, we told the angry mob, we are not Jews, we are not your target. Not we are not Israelis. We are not Jews. These are German, not tourists. These are people that I say don't hate Israel by any stretch. They came here as tourists, right? They're probably more indifferent, see Israel like, just another country, and they might see the Palestinians just another so-called people or whatever, right? Another culture to see or whatever. But then when it comes to push comes to shove, it's, oh, we're not Jews, right? These are Germans, right? Very likely related to the Nazis, saying, oh, no, we're not the Jews. Don't go after us. Get the Jews. They do this in the land of Israel, right? And these are ones that you would say might be our friends. They come here even, right? Or friendly at least. I watched their interview with the press after, explaining that that's what they told them. They didn't even say Israeli. They didn't change their story. I wonder what else they're leaving out. It makes me feel like it's hopeless when it comes to the West, that they obviously anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. That was very clear in what they were saying in the whole story. But it seems like there's any problem. Hey, I don't have a problem with Jews. I love Jews. I'll even go visit Israel. Let's immediately throw the Jews under the bus to save myself, even though they've done nothing. Not just I won't stand up for them, but I will throw Jews under the bus. It was a fascinating microcosm of watching them being interviewed and these words coming out of their mouths saying, we're not Jews. Don't go after. You're not who you want.
So
what do you make of this? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a slightly different take.
Please, I'm sure you do. That's why I'm asking you. Yeah, what's your take?
Yeah, I mean, look, I saw that news story. I think them saying, we're not Jews was to save their own skin for sure. But the issue there really, to me, is that why is that acceptable? You remember that phrase, the soft bigotry,
low expectations. Exactly right. Right.
This is that. Why should it be acceptable? If an Arab car drives or a Palestinian car drives into Israel, no one's getting attacked.
No one's doing anything. They're just another car.
They're driving along, and everyone's driving as badly as each other. That's the most dangerous thing that's going to happen. But here, we almost the news story wasn't that we're accepting the fact that those people went to those people, the Germans in the car, with the expectation that they were probably going to kill them. Okay, and so for me, that shows that these attacks are anti-Semitic, right? They said we're not Jews, get to save their skin, but actually it shines the light on the anti-Semitism of the attackers, and the fact that the world does nothing, there's no outrage, really says a lot about what we're allowing. And that speaks a lot to the way that people perceive the Middle East conflict as well. That soft bigotry of low expectations. Israel is subject to very, very high expectations, perhaps even higher than any other country, right? And we see that all the time. We saw it during COVID, when there was huge pressure on Israel to supply vaccines to the Palestinian Authority, despite the fact that the whole point of the Palestinian Authority was to give a level of independence to the Palestinians, and they have their own health authority, and they had rejected that very support in any case. So, there's a lot to unpick here, but it certainly talks to prejudices that exist when people are viewing Israel on the one hand and Palestinians on the other.
Do you think it is effective when someone holds Arabs or Muslims to lower expectations? By the way, this is very prevalent in Israel. Do you think it's helpful for the narrative to call them Islamophobic?
Islamophobic because they have low expectations of Arabs.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they're like these people. They're equating. They're accepting the behavior of Arabs towards Jews the same as you would to a hungry predator to any human in the wild. And they say, well, what did you expect? It's like, oh, you took a stick and you hit a bee's nest. It's like you got stung. Like, what did you expect? It's, you know what I mean? It's like that.
Yeah.
Like, I'm starting to wonder, I think because they don't care about Jews as anti-Semites. They also don't care about Arabs. They're only in my opinion now, my strong opinions, they're supporting the Arabs as a way to attack Jews without having to attack Jews directly. And that comes out through the bigotry of low expectations by allowing anti-Semitism, and we'll use the Arabs or the Islamic world to attack Jews.
Which is why you saw the hypocrisy of, you didn't see Roger Waters or people who are so, into the Palestinian cause supporting the Abraham Accords, for instance, right? Or people who
Right.
claim that they want to support peace are loath to support when there are actual peace efforts on the ground. They don't want us reconciling or being okay with each other. They never speak about the fact that, you know, the march for Arab equality within Israel, you know, the amazing things that we see about Arab integration in the state of Israel. They never talk about
You
that.
could talk about gay rights, women rights, minority rights, free speech, freedom of assembly, all of this bullshit, these fake liberal. I'm saying fake because they preach it, but they don't give a care. They don't care about it actually happening anywhere else or anywhere really.
So all too often, you know, the Israeli-Arab conflict is used as something, a stick to beat Israel with. And yes, it is often a mask for anti-Semitism. That's a real and genuine problem. I know as an Israeli, look, the last eyes that I saw before I was put under when I went into hospital for a life-saving operation were that of a Jewish and Arab doctor working together in order to save my Jewish life, right? These are stories that are not told. There's quiet coexistence that happens in Israel every single day, but the majority of people will never hear about it.
Mm-hmm. Right. So do you think, to go back to my question, do you think it's helpful to frame those that are bigots against Jews and Muslims, one, because they like seeing Jews suffer, and two, they hold Arabs to the standards that they would have been animals, which is, I think, which is Islamophobic. Um, do you think it's productive to call out it's Islamophobic? Because I think, unfortunately, in the West, they respond more socially to being called an Islamophobe than, let's say, an anti-Semite.
Yeah, I hear that. I think that's probably true. And I think that it is definitely bigotry. There's no reason why we should expect people to act like this. And I think the majority of people won't. And I think that Palestinians have been ill-served by their leaders. And that's really where the target of our criticism should be, and people's criticism should be, on a failed Palestinian leadership that, instead of teaching peace, has taught hate for decades, has indoctrinated it into their society, has drip fed young people with TV programs and mass media about dehumanizing Jews and actually killing Jews. Right now, in this wave of terrorism we're seeing TikTok instructional videos of how to kill Jewish people, how to stab them in the streets, how to shoot them at point blank range. And the result is a terror attack in Dizengoff Street in Tel Aviv that has today, as we speak, claimed the life of one of the 3 people who was attacked at point blank range. So this is the natural result. And it's almost like there's no culpability for the people that are leading that effort.
Yeah, TikTok should be banned. But yeah, it's a big issue. It's an increasing challenge issue. Pew did research. They said, what is your opinion on Jews? They did this by country, but they also did Gaza and the Arabs of Judea and Samaria, also known as the West Bank. And 99% in Gaza had a very negative opinion of Jews, and 96% of those in Judea and Samaria. Just so you understand, if you think this is like how extensive the hatred is of Jews, and there's more pro-Hitler than, like, very deranged what's going on there. But I think to blame the PA leadership isn't fair, because you can look at the Iranian leadership and you can blame the leadership, because the people do not reflect the Iranian leadership. But unfortunately, whether it's through propaganda or whatever it is, the Arabs in Judea and Samaria and Gaza do reflect their leadership. They support them. They support them in every way, in their values and all of that. Do you think that, how helpful is it to just talk about the leadership, when obviously no matter who you put there as a leader, it's not really going to change what happens?
Well, I think the leaders do have the responsibility and can make a change if they want to. I just think that it's deluded to think peace is something that could happen overnight. Peace is going to be generational. And we believe that education is the road to peace. That's why we're into the education of it all. And I believe that if education was put into place, it would make a big difference. And unfortunately, the opposite is true. Hate education is the system that we're seeing virulently in Gaza, and really almost not less so in Judea and Samaria, in the West Bank, in Palestinian run communities. And so that's a real problem. And so, you reap what you sow. The reason you see the phenomenon, what an awful thing, right? By the way, the phenomenon of a 14, 15, 16-year-old terrorist is because they've been bred to hate by a system. And sure, you can blame the leaders, but you also blame the teachers and you blame the parents and the system that creates that. It's a horrific thing to see, and something that really should bring shame to Palestinian leaders, and something that we will not rectify the situation until we reverse that education that's happening and the hate seeping out from it.
So, based on what you just said, you would say that Europe is also responsible because they're promoting these schools, they're covering them up. They don't want to address. They don't want to address the murder of Jews and the praise of Hitler in textbooks.
Yeah, then they're financing these efforts as
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, right. I'm just saying. I just think if you are going to talk about the hatred, the Palestinians, you should talk about the Europeans too, down to the European governments, to the NGOs, to even corporations. These are evil people. It's very infuriating. Let's turn it back to a positive note because I don't know how to pivot. I don't know how to pivot from such depression. If you were for those, let's say, and we'll wrap up soon. For those, let's say, that will kind of want to be a little bit more active and be a little bit more supportive in Israel, but they have a life. They don't want to immerse themselves in it. What is the right way to do it? What's the right way to be able to have an impact with minimal effort on social media? What do you think? Other than let's say retweeting.
Look, on the one hand, the easiest thing to do is to share your reality. So it's harder to hate people that you know and
True.
people that you like. And
Right.
So in the same way that I would hope you'd invite strangers to your Friday night table, at the same way you do that, you can do that on social media. Give an insight into your life, the photos that you're sharing. Have people understand what Israel means to you as well. So in addition to sharing your Hanukkah experience, have people understand what Israel means to you, to your identity. Israel is central to Jewish identity, and people don't often understand that, right? That Israel is the place that eventually we all come from. And the vast majority of Jews will affiliate to that sentiment. So show people that's the easiest way of doing that. Bring people into your life as a Jew or as an ally of Jews and Israel. Then you can get on to sharing great material. Obviously, I think a lot of great stuff comes from us at StandWithUs, but there are so many great content creators in this space that are sharing great content. So sharing is also a great thing to be able to do. And understand the power that you have. Everybody has their own network. And at some point, those networks cross over into an area of people that otherwise would not get accurate information. And so, by doing that, you really are influencing people. So to understand the power that you have in your own network as well.
Awesome. If people want to be able to follow you and learn more about Stand With Us and how they can get involved and just see the content you're putting out, where can they follow you?
So I personally am at Michael Dickson, Dickson, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, Mr. Michael Dickson at Instagram, other platforms as well. Stand With Us is Stand With Us across all platforms. And you can find our content, our explainers, our fact sheets, our brochures, our videos, our everything at StandWithUs.com.
Awesome. Great. And we'll make sure to include everything in the description below. Michael, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.